Okay, I think we're streaming. How's it going, everybody? Today on my live stream, I'm going to talk specifically about Shaun King, who pushed a story that turned out to be a false allegation against a Texas police officer. A woman claimed that he raped her, and it turned out to be a false rape allegation that got over 80,000 shares, was eventually deleted, and when the police department released body cam footage, it became apparent that this story was, in fact, a false allegation. But first, here's what you should do. Hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to my channel, follow me on Twitter, because I do have videos every day at 4 p.m., and I'm going to be doing periodic live streams like this. So subscribe, because that will be available. And also, if you want to be involved in the discussion, you can comment below, but there's also Super Chat. And if you give at least $2, your comment will appear in a special box that I can read. It makes it easier to read comments. And if you give at least $5, your comment will appear above everyone else's in a special window, and it'll also appear in the video. So first, you can pop over to Patreon if you want to support my work. You just click Become a Patron, and whatever works for you. This is what allows me to do what I do, so if you're into it, you can really help me out by becoming a patron. But let's just start right away with this story. This is a photo. Now this is Ryan Saavedra. I don't know how to pronounce his name, so forgive me, Ryan. But this is an archive. This is a screen grab of a tweet from Shaun King. He said, "This woman was kidnapped and raped by a Texas state trooper, Officer Hubbard. She is now being held hostage in Ellis County Jail." I want to say, before moving forward, this is a false allegation. Now, Shaun King did address this. We'll get to this. He says, "Sharita Dixon Cole just happens to be a close personal friend of civil rights attorney, my friend at Merit Law. These are the facts that he got from her family. I'm not going to go into detail on what happened, because the story might actually get my YouTube channel demonetized or sanctioned in some way. But there were several more tweets sent out by Shaun King. I just spoke to a witness who says he strangely saw Sharita Dixon Cole put into the front seat of this officer's car, as she said in her statement to family." Another post, "Just confirmed that Sharita Dixon Cole passed her breathalyzer test and was arrested without cause." And then he says, "Very important story by K. West Savali, not only on the sexual assault of Sharita Dixon Cole, but on the mistreatment of black women by American police across the country, and why these stories are just not told widely enough." Now, earlier today, I commented on this by saying, false rape allegation was pushed by Shaun King and shared over 80,000 times before being deleted. Police released full body cam footage refuting the allegation. I then said, hopefully Mr. King publishes an apology and statement so people can be informed of his error. And guess what? Shaun King did. He said, "When the victim you fought for turns out to be the victimizer, Sharita Dixon Cole, and the painful consequence of a false report of sexual assault and police misconduct, my open thoughts." Now, I'm not going to read the entirety of his post because there is a lot here. Suffice it to say, you can do a medium search for @Shaun King if you'd like to read this. But I want to just straight up highlight a few of the passages in here. He says, "When the victim you fought for turns out to be the victimizer," basically the same thing as the tweet. He says, "On this past Sunday evening, after being contacted by family, friends, and attorneys for a Texas woman named Sharita Dixon Cole, I was told that she had been sexually assaulted and violently threatened by a police officer while in custody. I was horrified. Sadly, these things happen way too often in our country. I've walked victims through this before, many fighting for years on end to prove the truth behind their victimization. Sharita Dixon Cole's allegations were genuinely awful. They were also forcefully supported by her fiancé, who was present for some of the encounter they described. Her character was defended to me by those who knew her well. I probed. Earlier today, I was able to review nearly 2 hours of body camera footage provided by the police department. The footage appears to be authentic and trustworthy. At no time does it show any of the horrible allegations originally made by Sharita Dixon Cole. The officer never threatens her or her fiancé as she described. No sexual assault of any kind takes place. From all indications, the officer, Daniel Hubbard, was very professional and patient throughout the ordeal. The whole thing was rather routine and painfully normal. The arrest, based on the video, is arguably unwarranted, but that's rather irrelevant here. The officer administered a DUI test and she passed every physical requirement and request over the course of 20 straight minutes of being examined. She also passed the breathalyzer test twice, breathing under the legal limit 2 different times, according to the police report. The officer then communicated to Sharita and her fiancé, who arrived on the scene later, that the arrest was a courtesy That is his prerogative if he still deemed that she was under the influence or was an unsafe driver. That's how this case should have been discussed. That appears to be most of what went wrong here in terms of the actual encounter with the officer. Now, I want to point out, hopefully, Shaun King's statement on this is coming from the police report, he does make reference to it, and not from Sharita or her fiancé, who have already proven to be untrustworthy. Now, here's what's interesting. He says, what's so baffling is that Sharita was calm and respectful the entire time. Her fiancé was calm and respectful. The officer was calm and respectful. From start to finish, Sharita was in the custody of the officer for about an hour. It was normal and without incident. No one even raised their voices. Shaun King says, I've watched the whole hour they together from start to finish 3 different times now. None of the criminal allegations that Sharita Dixon Cole communicated very clearly to her family, friends, and attorneys ever took place on this video. Not one. Not the threats, not the assault, none of it. It is one of the most bizarre things I have heard of. And now, this is the most important point. To this very moment, Sharita Dixon Cole still insists everything that she said happened actually happened. She claims the body camera footage must have been edited to remove the worst parts. It's not unthinkable. I have seen it happen before, he says, but it absolutely does not appear to happen here. He says that he viewed it with an editing expert. Nothing horrible took place here. The last thing I want to point out is he does go on record to say that she's not mentally ill, she has no arrest record, but he specifically denounces her. He says that she victimized us. She victimized the man she falsely accused, and she victimized those who stood up for her, believing that she had experienced the worst crimes. Now, I don't see him actually issuing an apology for pushing this story, but he does denounce her time and time again. So there's a few things I want to say, because look, an apology isn't mandatory in issues like this. It's greatly appreciated if he was going to apologize. But look, Shaun King pushed a story, and he said that he had reason to believe that it was true. I think in this instance, what we need to pay attention to is Shaun King's profile. He's very well known. He has a lot of followers. And it's important for people who are high profile to take into consideration when they push stories without evidence. He simply believed character witnesses, he believed this woman, and he believed her fiancé. I mean, that's a lot of circumstantial evidence. But you have to be very careful if you're going to assert facts, which is what Shaun King did, saying that this officer did, in fact, kidnap and rape this woman. It turns out none of that was true. It would be great if Shaun King did include an apology. If it's in there, I may have missed it. But for the most part, he does denounce her. He does say that she victimized this officer, and he comes out with a post bringing it up. So, I mean, that's the least you could do, I suppose. And so, look, encourage good behavior. Shaun King pushing the story was a mistake. I strongly encourage everybody who wants to push stories like this or hears these stories, make sure you can back up the claims. Otherwise, you will actually victimize someone else. So let's make one thing clear. When Shaun King says that she victimized that officer, yeah, and there were other people who played a role in that. The people who pushed her story without evidence. If this person is lying for personal gain, maybe because she wanted to get out of the charge and force the police department to drop the arrest or whatever, well, Shaun King was an unwitting participant in that victimization of this officer, who by Shaun King's own assessment was professional. We need to be very careful about who gets victimized, about having evidence, and there's a reason why we have the Fifth Amendment. There's a reason why we have due process, and there's a reason why we shouldn't rush to vigilante or mob justice. It's because in this instance, the woman that people thought was the victim turned out to be the perpetrator. This is why the Constitution has, there's the Bill of Rights, and there's a lot of things in it that protect us from mob rule and things like that. So, I don't know, there's a couple super chats, and I'll get some of the comments. Someone said unwitting. Yeah, let me clarify, absolutely unwitting. Shaun King says he believed this woman. I don't think Shaun King was actively trying to victimize a cop who was innocent. I think Shaun King genuinely is just not a journalist and just believes what his friends tell him. And that's why I think it's important to take consideration that people who are as of high profile as Shaun King need to be careful. Look, if you've got 10 followers, you should still be careful. But Shaun King has nearly 1 million Twitter followers. So in this instance, I think useful idiot is the appropriate term. Unwitting makes perfect sense. And again, encourage good behavior. If Shaun King's going to come out and address that he was wrong and straight up denounce this woman and say that she is the perpetrator and she victimized this person, encourage that behavior. That's good. I'd like to see an apology. Again, it might be in there. Maybe I missed it, but I did see an apology, and that would be appropriate. Maybe he tweeted about it. I don't want to act like, Anyway, Noel said, Tim, I love and appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in and hanging out. Fascist lobster dictatorship now. Thank you for the New Zealand $2 daily reminder. I'm not going to say that, but I appreciate the super chat. Hydra509 says, what's up, Tim? Not a patron, but wanted to support you. Thank you for the support. Dances with Bears comments, just like the NAACP, guy's fake story and woman in Virginia, did they ever apologize? I'm not entirely sure, necessarily. I have a few other stories that I want to talk about today. Shaun King was just the main story because this has been going viral, and so I wanted to make sure that people understood where we're at so far with it. That body cam footage was released. You can watch the whole thing if you Google search it. I can't really, I don't know if I can post links in here or anything, but yeah, I just want to make sure everybody knew that Shaun King did address it, because I issued that statement earlier saying that I'd like to see him make a statement and apologize, and then a few hours after that, I believe, he made this post on Medium, and so I appreciate that he's calling out this woman, saying that she is victimizing people. I think that's appropriate, and I would like to encourage that good behavior, so respect for coming out and making a statement, though, again, I would like to see an apology. I've got a couple other stories, and then we can just hang out and chat for a little while. The first one I'm going to talk about is about Evergreen State, and this is from the Wall Street Journal. I don't think I need to pull up the source for you guys. I'll just show you real quick the Wall Street Journal source here. Rough social justice at Evergreen State. The Washington's college enrollment plummets as even the left sours on protest mob politics. This is interesting. It's not a story that I think necessarily warrants its own, 10-minute long analysis and video and all this stuff. But basically, they're looking at 500 and 600 fewer students enrolling in next fall, 2018, as opposed to 2017. And that is a drop of around 17%. That is massive. So it says here, when President George Bridges saw an internal email outlining these numbers, his impulse was to get the Public Relations Department to finesse them. Otherwise, he wrote, they might end up appearing elsewhere in ways that will be used against us. Well, how about we talk about when you allow students to take over the school, to force out professors who are generally respected. The average person going to college, let's make this clear. The kids who want to go to college to work in botany and agriculture, Evergreen's got like a cool agriculture department and other things. I'm not saying that's all they do. When they hear that protesters shut the school down, they're thinking about their life goals, right? You've got a kid who says, man, I really want to study X. Evergreen might be the place to do that. Then they hear that the school gets shut down, and the president essentially allows these students to do this. These videos come out showing that these students are working with faculty to allow these shutdowns to happen. And what do you think that kid who wants to work in science or whatever field is going to say? He's going to say, well, I shouldn't do it there, because the school will be disrupted and the faculty allows it. So yeah, no surprise that they're seeing a massive drop-off. And I think I can add to this and just talk about, I didn't have this pulled up. No, I was going to mention Mizzou University because after that protest they saw a decline, but I don't necessarily think it's relevant, and I think they might actually be recovering as of this year, so that's kind of blown over. So maybe Evergreen will actually see enrollment increase in a couple years, and they'll get through this. But now let me get to these super chats. Bruno Bronowski, just $10 super chat. Thank you for the support. Stedman Wellis says, what are your thoughts on BLM? Are they a racist organization? I can't help but think that if they were white, I would easily be able to call them highly racist based on their leaders' activities. BLM refers to two things in the political landscape, the Bureau of Land Management and Black Lives Matter. Obviously, in the context we're talking about Black Lives Matter, I just wanted to mention that because I see a lot of people mention BLM, and sometimes I'm like, are they talking about the federal land grabs that people are like freaking out about, or are they talking about Black Lives Matter? My thoughts are that the majority of people who support Black Lives Matter are not day-to-day activists. They're regular people who believe that we need to do something to help minority communities, and that's totally fine. Now, there are people within it who I would say are good and bad. There are people who are genuine and honest and really want to fight for good causes. Unfortunately, the people that tend to rise up to the top in any organization are going to be those who are the most flamboyant or offensive or aggressive. So I can't say anything specifically about core leadership within Black Lives Matter, and I don't really have strong opinions about them. They're a group, they advocate for things like any other partisan group, and it is what it is. But I would absolutely agree. The people who are chanting essentially the non-black version, anybody who brings up like white men or something like that, are branded racist and are mocked relentlessly. So I mentioned this on yesterday's stream about the smartest man in the world, that this guy said, basically, if you have identitarianism, then expect to have it for everyone. Otherwise, don't have it at all. And so if you start pushing Black Lives Matter and start advocating for identitarianism for only certain races, don't be surprised when white people do the exact same thing. And for the record, I am not a fan of identity politics. Awesome Anus. I think I'm pronouncing that wrong. Does Schlongberg deserve what is happening to him? I don't know what it's a reference to, unfortunately. Someone said, so what Tim is saying is that, like everything else, BLM is an example, left out progressivism poisons everything. No, I'm not saying that, but, you know, there have been instances where people have attributed certain acts of terror to Black Lives Matter, which I don't think is necessarily fair. Like, you had the identity extremist in Dallas. There was a guy who assassinated a Latino cop and an Asian cop in front of my apartment in New York. This happened in December of 2015. And I actually have up on my wall a piece of the police tape from when my street was shut down. So it happened at the end of my block, or like a half block away. I lived near Myrtle and Tompkins, and I think it happened on Myrtle and Tompkins, and I was like Myrtle and Graham, can't remember. But basically, my whole street was surrounded by cops. They wouldn't let me leave my house, but ninja, so I just crouched down, got my bag, snuck out, went through the housing across the street, and then started live streaming what was going on. But a lot of people said this guy was Black Lives Matter, and a lot of people try to claim that Black Lives Matter are the ones engaging in this. Like, no, there are certainly some people who will. You get a large enough group of people, then yes, eventually some person who aligns with that group is going to do something. It's like with what happened with the Proud Boys. Did a Proud Boy go to Vic Berger's house and threaten him? I think it's highly probable. You know, when you have 5,000 Proud Boys, one of them is going to do something dumb. It happens, you know? So then to blanket the entire organization, I think is unfair. I have a lot of friends who consider themselves Black Lives Matter activists who are not day-to-day activists, who work every day and don't focus on this stuff, and I do not think it's fair to imply that they're, racist or terroristic or anything like that. It's just an exaggeration. The bastard said, press 1 if it's okay to be white. And this is like one of the funniest and stupidest things that, from my understanding, and I could be wrong, the idea of the, okay to be white thing was that you make a statement as benign as that and people will freak out, right? The idea was if you walk around with stickers saying this, everyone's going to assume, they're going to call it white supremacy. They're going to say it's not okay and things like that. And that's literally what happened. Like, I can't remember where I was, but a fight broke out. Some guy punched another guy. There were some kids wearing stickers. This is a protest in New York. These kids were wearing stickers that said, okay to be white or whatever. And then a bunch of people started getting into fights with them, saying that they were racist and it was white supremacy. And I guess that was the point of the troll. So I guess good job for falling for it, which is ridiculous. Reginald Cooper, thanks for the super chat. Says, I love you, man. Good work. I've got another story that was sent to me that I think is really funny. I believe this one came through the Discord. So I have a Discord set up. It's in the description below. And if you want to chat on a day-to-day basis with other people, that's open and available. I'm not always in, I'm actually always in the room. It's always open, but I'm often working, so I don't get a chance to actually, engage. But now I want to talk about this story because this one's particularly pertinent, and this one is about, so this story we have is about, I don't necessarily understand, I think it's UK politics. Labour suspends male activist who claims to identify as a woman on Wednesdays. So this is from Benjamin Butterworth at the Essential Daily Briefing. iNews, that's what we have here. And so here's a story. A man from Labour suspended after he attempted to subvert the party rules on gender self-identification. Party activist David Lewis claimed he identified as a woman on Wednesdays and so was eligible to stand for the constituency Labour Party's women's officer position as the election happened to fall on a Wednesday. Lewis said that he decided to stand for the role, which party rules say can only be held by a woman, in order to draw attention to Labor's policy of self-definition, where a person is recognized as a gender they publicly define as. He said, "My womanness is expressed by my saying I self-identify as a woman now and again on Wednesdays. I make no changes in my behavior or appearance. I keep my name, David, and my male pronouns. I wear the same sort of clothes I wear the rest of the week. I keep my beard. I enjoy the full womanness of my beard." So, I guess a Labor spokesperson said that the party was committed to upholding the principle of affirmative action for women and would not stand for an obvious attempt to take advantage of the rules. This is interesting. We'll come back to this. Anyone attempting to breach Labor Party rules and subvert the intention of all women shortlists, women officers, or minimum quotas for women will be dealt with via our established safeguards, selection procedures, and disciplinary measures, the party added. In a statement, the party condemned members who have employed abuse or intimidation in the debate around trans rights, having suspended a number of anti-trans campaigners. Now, this statement right here is extremely dangerous to trans rights. They said they are committed to upholding the principle of affirmative action for women and would not stand for an obvious attempt to take advantage of the rules. What gives them the right to determine who is taking advantage of the rules? Simply because this man looks like a man, acts like a man, does not mean he is not entitled to the same identification rules as anybody else. At least in New York City, you don't have to wear any clothes. You can identify as whatever you want, regardless of what you call yourself, regardless of what pronouns you use. So in every capacity, what this man did, at least in New York City and many states in the US, it was entirely within his rights to do. And if they think it was an obvious attempt to take advantage of the rules, this is setting dangerous precedent. This means that Labor can kick people out who they think don't qualify as women. This means that they could target a trans woman and say they were simply taking advantage of the rules. This is a big problem that I've talked about time and time again. I think I talked about this yesterday, in that the more we create rules to protect minorities and marginalized groups, the more they will easily be abused. In New York City, they recognize officially 31 genders, but by their own legal definition, they recognize any and all genders you could make up. And I am not exaggerating. Gender is defined in New York City as self-image. The law specifically states that it doesn't matter what you wear, it doesn't matter what you call yourself, and no public accommodation, no business or anything that provides public accommodation can discriminate against you based on what they think you should or shouldn't be doing. In which case, if this happened in New York City, it would be absolutely a violation of New York's human rights law. However, this man, David Lewis, I think is what his name was, said that he was doing it on purpose to make a point. In which case, yes, you could say, okay, we get it, go away. But that means that someone could come up and just say, no, I mean this seriously. I do identify on Wednesdays. Because theoretically, I believe that falls under what's called gender fluid. In which case, if someone really wanted to do this, they could just say it was true and refuse to back down. And then you have these rules defending them effectively. So what I talked about yesterday, the example I used is obesity. Is it a disability? Well, a lot of people will say it's not. Look, if you don't exercise, if you eat poorly, you will gain weight, and that's poor lifestyle choices you made. However, there are some people who become obese due to actual disabilities, for instance, hypothyroidism, which is more like edema. It's complicated, but basically, you could come across somebody who is large and overweight simply because of a disability, in which case, should we accommodate them in places like theaters or airplanes? Well, we have a law protecting the disabled, and in New York, for instance, they have to make sure that businesses are handicap accessible. They have to accommodate for disabilities, otherwise they are seen as discriminating because people with disabilities are considered a protected class. But how do you differentiate between someone who is disabled and someone who is just lying or has poor lifestyle choices? How do you know if someone is disabled if they don't present disabled? There was a story I read in the news a while ago about somebody who parked in a handicap space with a handicap sticker, got out of the car, and walked into the store. Someone else saw them walking fine and then, keyed their car and slashed it up or something because they were like, this person's faking being handicapped. But the reality was this person was in fact handicapped and only could walk a short distance comfortably before having to stop. And that was the point of the handicap placard. In which case, this bystander thought they were doing the right thing by saying this person isn't really handicapped. You don't always know if it's true. So then what happens is you create loopholes that allow people to exploit these policies to manipulate the system and gain benefits. There are people who use, let's look at like Walmart. Walmart provides those little driving carts. You can sit down and drive. These are for people, they're for everybody, really. But I think typically the idea with these is if you're on crutches, if your leg is broken, if you really have problems walking, if you truly are disabled, they provide these carts for you. But most of the time, they're used by people who are just morbidly obese, who can't walk. And yes, I'm not saying Walmart is discriminating against those people. I think these carts are for everybody, including these people. But the idea is we're trying to create things to actually help people who have real problems. They'll just end up encouraging or being used by people who have poor lifestyle choices or might not actually be injured. And this creates a huge problem. Looking at New York and the law, the human rights law around gender, a man could just one day say, hey, guess what? I'm a woman. And by New York human rights law, he is. And is now allowed to identify, even using male pronouns, even looking totally male, dressing male, and using a male name and changing literally nothing. You can identify however you choose, and you can make genders up. So ultimately, I think we need some kind of policy to protect those who are facing, there are actual protected classes who do need some kind of protections. But I think we also need to pay attention to the potential for loopholes if we keep expanding laws to protect everybody. They need to be clearly defined, otherwise it's all just going to fall apart. And this story about this guy claiming to identify as a woman on Wednesdays falls right into that. So now let me hit up some of these super chats. Fascist Lobster Dictatorship says, press F to pay respects for Bering. Yeah, I heard Bering got his channel terminated. So I guess we'll see what happens. Awesome Manus. It's awesome plus anonymous. Oh, Awesome Manus. I guess that's right. Does Aaron Schlossberg deserve what is happening to him? No, I don't know. I don't know who that guy is. WZRBS's thoughts on Bering getting banned. I will get to that in just 1 second. Reginald Cooper. Reuters poll shows rep lead generic ballot a first. Oh, interesting. Is that Sakchan? I don't know, or Sichan? Human rights tribunals often have to determine whether or not people are being sincere when trying to take advantage of things like religious rights protection. Same thing could be used for trans people. But it becomes particularly troublesome when you don't define what makes someone trans or not. So think about this. If a tribunal says, you know what, we don't think this person is actually trans, then at what point are we not actually protecting the trans community because certain individuals are being denied these protections? So maybe it's not perfect, and there will be some people who steal and some people who are, falsely accused of milking or taking advantage of the system. But the problems exist. I bring this up because I have experience in social engineering and hacking growing up. And one of the goals of social engineering is to look for holes in the system that can be exploited. It's called human hacking. And when I see policies like this, a con artist could easily get a quick payday by simply choosing to identify a certain way and causing an uproar in public accommodation in New York City, forcing people to use words and names that are offensive or they don't like, dressing in a way that is ridiculously offensive, and then defending it in court and forcing a court to either, approve or deny a certain gender. There's a potential here. I'm not saying it'll ever happen. I'm just saying we have to be careful about creating these massive loopholes. The city of Detroit comments, he said, tribunals are about as legit as Sharia court laws. Adam Grab says, the real dilemma is that King is poised to believe all stories of victimhood without a critical eye. After the election, he reposted a torrent of hate crime stories. Many were unsubstantiated and fake. Yes. So I think I always say incompetence over malice, and there's a reason for this. You can't prove malice in many instances. So what happens when you come out and say Shaun King is lying deliberately? His fans are going to say, oh my God, you're a partisan hack trying to discredit Shaun King. But what happens when you say, hey Shaun, I love that you're fighting for justice, but I gotta admit you're really wrong too often on a lot of these things, and I would appreciate more scrutiny. then the fans are going to be like, yeah, you know, Shaun should be criticized for getting this wrong, but we do think he's doing the right thing. Look, you need to approach people on reasonable terms. If you approach them as enemies, they'll ignore you, and oftentimes people will combat you simply for the sake of fighting against you, even if they know they're wrong. The point is, it's hard to prove that Shaun King was malicious against this officer. But if he wasn't malicious, he was absolutely incompetent. Incompetence, you can definitively say. Because I assure you, Shaun King is not going to admit he did this on purpose, and I honestly don't think he did. But if he really was trying to malign this officer, he'll never say he did, in which case there's only one alternative. You're really bad at what you do. And that's something he'll have to actively admit to. The alternative is saying it was deliberate, in which he'll get sued. So I think for the most part, it's always smarter to err on the side of you are awful at your job and you shouldn't have it. Because when these journalists lie, look, there are instances where journalists lie where it's like, yeah, that's obviously BS and you're lying. But when you don't know for sure, you can flat out say like, wow, you're a really bad journalist and I can prove it. That's crazy. And then people have no choice but to be like, oh wow, that is fact checking wrong. That journalist is bad at what they do. That you can prove. The Bastard says, thoughts on Elon Musk going after MSM? Oh, catharsis, sweet, sweet catharsis. Elon Musk at his wit's end. Yep. Now here's what, you know what, I got triggered by this. Like, I'm being facetious, but I got kind of triggered by this because what he's talking about is what I have been trying to implement with Subverse and don't have the funding to do. And I've met with people and we've talked about it, and I've publicly spoken about the idea of a news platform where you can rate the journalists and the stories and do exactly what Musk said he wanted to do. But now that Musk is saying it, people are coming out saying it's a terrible idea. Well, hold on, man. I was talking about this like a year ago, and people are like, oh, that's a really great idea, like a watchdog. That would be really cool. And now everyone's like, oh, Elon Musk, you Trump-supporting puppet. What are you talking about? That's such a dumb idea. And people are saying, like, why should the average person have the right to weigh in on what a journalist does and all this stuff? Well, listen. Journalism isn't about wealthy elites who are connected telling the we people what they should or shouldn't be doing. You don't have to be a journalist to have an opinion on what's going on. You don't have to be a plumber to know when a plumber is doing a bad job. You don't have to be a race car driver to know that that car flipped over and the guy lost the race. You don't have to be a journalist to know that someone is pushing out ideological bullcrap. And my response to the people who are saying Musk's idea is dumb is, first of all, you're immediately assuming he's doing something wrong. For all you know, he might come out with something that's very smart. He gave a very simple idea. And the other thing is, what do you think Wikipedia is? It's a bunch of people who sign up for accounts and then decide to start editing things. And they get into wars and accounts get locked and there's tiers of hierarchy about who can change what and who can lock things. And there's issues with bias in Wikipedia, but for the most part, Wikipedia works. So I think Elon Musk has some good ideas, and I'm glad to see that finally somebody with some ability is going to implement something like this, if he really does. However, I do think what would be better is if he just funded journalism. Plain and simple. What I think he'd be better off doing is creating a fund guaranteeing a certain amount of money for a certain amount of time to someone who is extremely vetted and nonpartisan to form a newsroom and not have to worry about advertising and not have to worry about clicks or anything like that, and literally just make fact-based news. And they don't have to worry about pissing off Musk, and Musk has no editorial control over this. He simply agrees to fund it for a certain amount of time, and then after that, maybe it dies, maybe it doesn't. I think that would work a lot better, but, you know, if Musk launches this thing where you can rate journalists or whatever, it's just another grain of sand in the watchdogging heap, so I totally welcome all of that. All right, what else we got here in the comments? I got through most of the stories that I want to talk about. There's a couple other stories that I wanted to pull up. Oh my God. Yeah, I think I should talk about the judge rule on Twitter. Let's dig into this one. So if you're not familiar, a federal judge issued an opinion on Trump's Twitter account saying he can't block people. Now, I was thinking about saving this to do a video tomorrow, but it is way too complicated. There's way too much going on, and I'm not a lawyer. So all I'm going to do right now is speculate as someone who has no idea what they're talking about, but I'm going to show you this story. So this is Judge rules Trump can't block people on Twitter. There's a few interesting things that need to be pointed out. Let's see. Where is it? So this is technically incorrect, right? They said the judge said the comment section of Trump's personal account is a public forum and that blocking users on the basis of political speech is a violation of their free speech rights under the First Amendment. However, they didn't call it a public forum. The official ruling said it was a designated public forum. There is a difference, but not one that necessarily matters in this instance. What they're saying essentially is that the comment thread beneath a tweet from Donald Trump is a public forum where people are discussing things, and by blocking people, you are removing their ability to engage in political discourse. I have a few arguments to make about what they've done, okay? So they said this case requires us to consider whether a public official may, consistent with the First Amendment, block a person from his Twitter account in response to the political views of that person has expressed, and whether the analysis differs because that public official is the President of the United States. Buchwald said, the answer to both questions is no. So let's look at this. They said it was a public forum, okay? However, that forum is privately owned. How is this going to work? This is unprecedented. There's a thing called a privately owned public space, POPs for short. And this is where, for instance, Zuccotti Park, where Occupy Wall Street took place, was privately owned but open to the public. And that means they were legally required to keep it open to the public. So I have a few questions. There was a ruling, I believe it was a lawsuit against the University of Virginia, I think, where they said a forum doesn't have to be a physical location, in which case you could then use that precedent to say, okay, Twitter falls under the guidelines of publishing and is not necessarily about a physical location. If it is a privately owned public forum, how do we cope with the situation of Twitter keeping it closed to the public, okay? So if Twitter suspends someone and says you can't come to Donald Trump's post, even though it is designated a public forum, how does that work? Is Twitter actively denying someone access to a public space? And there's bigger questions outside of just general legal arguments, because I'm not a lawyer. If Donald Trump, if it's being argued that he uses his Twitter account as his predominant method for sharing updates on his campaign and what's happening in the presidency, by blocking someone, suspending someone, or banning someone from Twitter, you are restricting their ability to gain information from the president through their primary vehicle. So this is interesting. Should the government be allowed to come in and then regulate Twitter simply because the president decided to use it? But if they do, is Twitter allowed to block people from engaging in public discourse with the president? When it comes to places like Occupy Wall Street, the people who own Zuccotti, where Occupy happened, weren't allowed to bar people from entering the park. If it's open to the public, it is, and you can't keep people out because of their protected speech. They were able to restrict certain behaviors. So this whole thing is getting crazy, with a lot of people speculating that Twitter might have to actually remove the block feature. Keep mute, but not block. Because by blocking someone, you are restricting their access to a potential public forum. Think about this. The judge is specifically referring to Trump's comment section, right? The replies to Donald Trump. However, what if something becomes absolutely newsworthy? Or what if someone has a Twitter account who becomes a public official? Are their past tweets a public forum? What if they were a public official and then leave the public office? Is it still a public forum? Is it then that if someone comments in response to Donald Trump's tweet, that after he leaves office, he can delete everything and it's no longer a public forum? What if someone has a section where they've blocked a bunch of people, and then part of what they said on Twitter is actually what gets them elected? Is that now a public forum? There's a lot of questions that get raised by this opinion, and a lot of people think this will be appealed. I'm not a lawyer though, so I really don't know. But I'm sitting here like reading I had the actual statement from the actual opinion, the whole draft. I was reading through it and I was like, Pandora's box has been unleashed. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe a lawyer will step in and say, nope, nothing will happen. It's all nonsense. RBS says Bearing. Okay, I have some thoughts on Bearing. For those that don't know, Bearing Bear was a channel that, I don't necessarily know how to describe him, but he was critical of regressive leftist politics, and I don't really know how to describe it, but I think it's in line with like anti-SJW kind of stuff. I've actually appeared on a live stream with Bearing. We had a conversation for a little while. He seemed very nice to me, and I've been told by a few people they're concerned that the reason he got banned was because he did advertisements for CBD oil. That's I'm not gonna be able to pronounce it. Cannabinoid oil. I don't think that's the case. Because I've also done ads for CBD oil. CBD oil derived from hemp, which is the stuff that has sponsored my channel, 100% legal in every single state. CBD oil derived from marijuana, different story. That's illegal in like certain places, but hemp oil CBD totally fine. Not only that, you can go on YouTube and you can search for CBD oil commercials and find 50 billion channels, some with over 1 million subscribers, who are talking about CBD. So I know a lot of people have talked about that. I don't think that's the case. Why Bearing got taken down? Well, I pulled up a couple random videos from him where he says some things that are considered hate speech. I think he was pulled for hate speech. I do. Because let me just put it this way. He used ableist slurs repeatedly in many of his videos, and I think someone at YouTube just decided to just pull him down. I think Bearing has been very aggressive towards certain people, mocking them and insulting them and using what is referred to as an ableist slur, because I can't say it because then I'll get pulled too. Do I think he should have been pulled? No. I think a lot of his videos were really tame and actually just him doing social commentary and critique. But if you want my opinion on why it happened, it's because YouTube is ridiculously sensitive. And I gotta admit, seeing that happen is terrifying. Like, this is my job. YouTube can fire me at any moment, and I have no idea why. Like, when you work somewhere, you have legal protections, and you can be like, hey, you can't fire me for fake reasons. You know, at will states, there's an argument to be made you can, but there still is wrongful termination. YouTube can just say, yeah, you don't care, you're gone. So yeah, I guess that's all I can really say about Bearing Bear. Now, what I will add is that Paul Joseph Watson tweeted his 1 million subscriber gold award from YouTube. So Paul Joseph Watson is way more offensive than Bearing Bear. Now, I don't think Paul's... look, I don't think being offensive warrants you getting your channel pulled. I think that's silly. But Paul mocks people like in very aggressive, much more aggressive ways, than Bearing. But he's got 1.2 million subs. He got his gold award. So clearly, I don't know, man. I don't know what Bearing did. Maybe Bearing will get reinstated. We'll see what happens. But I gotta say, there have been a wave of channels being terminated recently, and that's really scary. YouTube's absolutely doing a purge. We heard recently that Cyanide and Happiness, their cartoon shorts, had a mass demonetization hit their channel. I feel like YouTube's in dire straits, and they're just gonna start axing everybody. So it's scary, man. All right, we got here. Renovatio Juris says, I'm a qualified lawyer not in the US. From my reading, yes. The judge has either erred in law in declaring a private company, and by extension many others, as public utilities, or Pandora's box has indeed opened. Oh man. So there's another interesting thing. People who are non-citizens of the United States are still afforded the rights of the Constitution. You have free speech. You have to be free from search and seizure and all that stuff. So if you're a tourist, I wonder how that will affect users who are based in other countries but are active on a platform headquartered in the US, right? So, for instance, Sargon of Akkad, who is banned on Twitter and lives in the UK. Does he have a right to the public forum that is Twitter? I think there's an argument for no. He's not an American citizen, but at the same time, the servers are based in the US for the most part. So, as a user of a platform in the US, does he not have those rights? If he's not physically located here, does he not have those rights? How does that work? That'll be really interesting. I have no idea. As I said, for the 800th time, I am not a lawyer. So, let me see what else we got. Tim is broadcasting from his bunker at the moment. Nope, just my living room like I normally do. So, when I'm using the exact same camera I use to film my videos every day. It's the new one. I got the Sony RX. It's awesome. But because you can't get rid of some of the text on it, like there's a standby STVY in green, I had to like expand it. Because the camera looks way better than my webcam, which is this. And the microphone on the Sony is insanely good. It's amazing. So I'm going to use this instead, but, that ends up being kind of crummy. Mr. Nicktown says, where are we going when YouTube goes belly up? Lots have started moving out. Well, BitChute is backing everything up. I do have following on Minds. Honestly, I'll be very active on Twitter. But I gotta say, if YouTube goes belly up, I will be broke. And so, end of story. However, people supporting me on Patreon I will post a Patreon, right? So what'll probably happen is I'll upload my videos to somewhere like minds.com or maybe BitChute and publish them to Patreon. So the best thing about Patreon is that if YouTube takes me down, Patreon still exists, and if Patreon takes me down, YouTube still exists. And then I have PayPal on my website. So hopefully none of that happens. Because let me just say, YouTube, I actively gain like 150 subscribers every single day. And very few of them actually contribute. But just by watching, I'm generating ad revenue. Just by hanging out and getting in the super chat, these are direct donations to help fund my work. So YouTube is probably the best place. Getting YouTube deleted would be terrifying. But I also have second channel. I have a second channel. So you know what you should all do? You should all subscribe to youtube.com/timcastnews. Because what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to take this video and I'm going to break up the pieces and upload them as their own individual videos. I will probably do that very early tomorrow morning and space them out to be scheduled to be released every half hour. So you guys have already watched these, like, you know, if you came in late, then you didn't see the beginning part about Shaun King. But those will be videos that will be up on my second channel. And then I will keep doing my daily 4 p.m. videos. And I'm probably going to start live streaming much, much more frequently. So I did one yesterday, I did one today. I might do one tomorrow. We'll see what happens. Bruno Bernowski says, the blocked can anonymously visit/read the blocker's Twitter stream. 2. At notifications can distract the blocker. Does POTUS have to give out their phone number? I don't know about their phone number, but having to use incognito mode and sign out to view a Twitter thread doesn't work too well because you are still restricted. You can't look at manual replies from users, and you can't participate in the discussion. So ultimately it's a bit problematic. Madman00 says, one quick question. You may have already addressed it. Did you see what happened to Faith Goldie at the Quebec border? If so, what's your opinion on it? Oh, yeah. Faith Goldie got attacked by Antifa. They swatted her phone. They kicked it. That is detestable. I don't follow Faith Goldie. I don't know a lot of what she does. I know that I think she got fired from the Rebel because she went on like a Daily Stormer podcast or something like that. She's been accused of saying the 14 words. I asked, Faith Goldie was also recently deleted from Patreon. Now, I asked Faith what happened, and she said that she said the 14 words, which is, most people attribute it to like the Nazis and neo-Nazis. But she said the context was that she was trying to say that if you replace the word white in the 14 words with any other race, it's acceptable by social justice standards. Essentially arguing that identitarianism is okay for certain groups, but not for white people. But she also said she thinks that it's because she's doing investigations on the border, which they don't like. I don't know exactly why they got rid of her. I mean, it came almost right after she was physically attacked by Antifa, so I can't say that. Yeah, I really have no idea. The 14 words thing apparently happened in December, so I don't entirely know. And I'll say this too, I don't know enough about what Faith Goldie does or says. I've met her a handful of times. She's always been nice to me. I don't know much about her politics, but I do know she was, I believe she was removed from the Rebel for appearing on like a Daily Stormer podcast. Not like that immediately qualifies you for being fired or anything, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't know enough to have a solid opinion on her being terminated from Patreon. I typically err on the side of don't delete people from Patreon, you know, even if they have deplorable opinions and bad politics. Faith isn't someone going around beating people or anything like that, and she was just attacked, so, you know, it's another story. It's another one of these stories, I guess, where people get removed and you lose your income. And so, yeah. The powers that be can decide to remove you. It is what it is. I don't know. Fabrizio says, is the guy from Reactor your brother? He is, and he appears regularly on the podcast we do every Sunday. So periodically the podcast will be me, Emily, and Reactor talking about issues pertaining to the culture war, and then more than half the time we do interviews with people. So right now we're trying to focus more heavily on not high profile, more like high-value interviews. So right now I'm reaching out to an economist who speaks on issues of diversity and economics, because I'd like to talk about diversity initiatives in college and student loans and debt. Oof, excuse me. I just had shawarma before doing this. It was good. Peasant Tree says, same happened with Tommy Lauren. So here's another interesting story. Tommy was leaving a restaurant with her family, with her parents, and someone splashed water on her. And there's an interesting tweet I saw where someone said, they were like, liberals, let me know what is acceptable in terms of violence against people you ideologically oppose so that I can be prepared when I see you. But, this is interesting. When you have people arguing for, say, punch a Nazi, or advocating for violence against people like Milo or Tommy Loren, you're creating the rules, right? You're going to allow anyone of any opposing ideology to do that to anyone. You are not, I think these people believe that they're the only ones who have political opinions and other people don't, and it's a scary notion. M1 Game, so if a person that blocks a ton of people on Twitter gets elected, do they then have to unblock everyone? And that's another huge question. Now, in the ruling, they said they weren't ordering Trump to unblock anyone, just that the opinion of the court was that they can't block people. So yeah, are politicians going to block people preemptively? Because the argument is you can't block them for their political views. So maybe you just use a block bot. If you use a block bot, then is that okay? Because you're not really targeting people for their political views. You're just randomly blocking people. I think this is a can of worms. I think, whew. God Satan says, could we give the first and fourth to the world? If we could, we should. What if first give all the Bill of Rights to everybody? The Fifth Amendment, the right to what is Fifth Amendment? Due process, and not to incriminate yourself. The right to due process is paramount. Look what happened with this cop in the Shaun King story. If he didn't have due process, he'd be strung up. He'd be killed. You know what I mean? He's a perpetrator. Take him. We have witnesses. Everyone said it's true. We know what happens. I mean, you've got people on the left just saying over and over again, listen and believe. And Shaun King just did a huge disservice to those who advocate for listen and believe, because Shaun King just pushed over 80,000 shares, which is probably millions of views, a false rape allegation. So by Shaun's own logic now, he's had to refute listen and believe, which that's bad. It's bad for their politics, All right, let's see what else. M1 Game says, didn't he even identify the wrong officer? I'm not entirely sure. I don't know for sure. Rich says, a big fight is coming. Quote, punch a Nazi? Yeah, there will be a response. Well, here's the big problem, is that the people who are saying punch a Nazi aren't talking about Nazis. They're talking about anybody who is not a part of their dogmatic ideology. And I've had a few conversations with people on the left, and I think what happens to people who are on YouTube and people active in politics is that they associate all of these insane, regressive activist cultists with the entirety of the left. And let me make it absolutely clear, these are a fringe group, but not enough people on the left are willing to stand up to them because the left tends to be collectivist. And so they allow these extremely angry and aggressive voices to take over. And a good example of that is when Black Lives Matter activists took over the stage from Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders backed up and put his head down and did nothing. And that lost him a ton of support. You want to elect a leader who is strong, who's going to say, listen, I understand you want to speak, but this is not your forum, and you do not have a right to speak here, and then take the mic for them and say, end of story. He didn't do that. He backed up and let them bully him into taking his platform. There was a moment where somebody took over the mic at the Orlando nightclub shooting memorial demanding money from the audience. And people just let these aggressive bullies get away with this. So what's frustrating for me about the left is that too many people I know on the left who are not authoritarian are too scared to speak up. Well, you know what? Grow a pair and come out and start denouncing the authoritarians who have taken over the left and are besmirching the good name of those who stand up for actual left-wing politics. And what's particularly frustrating to me is that people time and time again on the right say I'm red-pilled or right-wing, and people on the left accuse me of the exact same thing, when in reality, no, I'm just a sane left-wing individual who is furious that these bullies, these aggressive authoritarians, were allowed to take over politics that I agree with, to the point where you actually have people abandoning the left. They've poisoned it. And it's insane, and it is extremely aggravating. Brett Weinstein is such a great example of someone I watched his testimony to, it was a Senate hearing on free speech on campuses, and what he said was absolutely incredible, and I have tremendous respect for this man because he is left-wing. He was active during Occupy Wall Street, and he is a sane leftist. The things he believes in, I agree with so much of what he says, and I think he is a very smart person, and it is infuriating to see these aggressive, insane cultist bullies, which is a small fringe group, taking over and forcing people like Bret Weinstein out and besmirching his name. This guy who's fighting against racism, who believes in equality and justice and all of these things, is having his name dragged through the mud for bullies. Where are the sane leftists to stand up for him? Because look, a lot of people on the right don't want to accept this. They exist. A lot of them are my friends. I'm trying to find somebody who is on the left and willing to have a calm discussion. They won't do it for one reason. They know they will be attacked. I have gone to many of my friends and said, hey man, you're like a social justice activist. Do you want to like have a discussion about this for the podcast? And they say, but I'll get attacked, I'll get called a Nazi, etc., etc. They don't want to stand up to the insane cultists. Okay, and someone, you got to do it. You got to do it, man. You can tell I'm frustrated about all that, huh? Ferry driver says, Tim, take off the beanie man for $2? No. I went skating today. I had a good day. My knee's kind of screwed up, but I've been taking it easy. And yeah, good day skating, you know? Yeah. Someone said, Tim Pool have a quest to offer. Everyone click on, oh, is this overheating? Yeah. Hey, my camera might cut out, so I'm going to end it right now. That symbol is a temperature warning. So I'm almost at the hour anyway, so thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the super chats. Comment below, give a thumbs up, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and stay tuned. New live streams at every opportunity. But before my camera shuts down from overheating, I'm going to have to call the live stream now. So the link to the Discord is in the description below. Again, thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all tomorrow.